Hello and welcome to The Edge, where we'll take an in-depth analysis of today's top stories by looking beyond the edge. We'll bring you not just the facts, but also deep insights into the topics with expert opinions and social media reactions. So let's make a start with our look beyond the edge. Drones have played a significant role in strengthening Turkey's national security and weakening its adversaries. Ankara is developing an increasing variety of lethal armed drones, ranging from large, high-flying, bomb-laden ones, to very small, low-flying ones that can form deadly swarms. How has Ankara forged a reputation for UAV manufacture? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is a matter of concern for 11 basin countries, and it seems that if Ethiopia and Egypt cannot reach an agreement to end the dispute, it's only a dispute over water sharing. Why can't Ethiopia and Egypt reach an agreement to solve the crisis? And the United States withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, prompting Iran to steadily overstep the Accord's limits on its nuclear program, designed to make it harder to develop an atomic bomb, an ambition that Tehran denies. Is it possible for Iran and the United States to reach common ground to solve the nuclear crisis? So these are the top three topics that we're going to be taking a look at today from Beyond the Edge. Let's get started. Drones have played a significant role in strengthening Turkey's national security and weakening its adversaries. Our infographic explains Turkey's military and defense success in recent years. Turkey is set to export unmanned aerial vehicles to Poland, making what will be the first such sale in history to a NATO and EU member country.
Turkey is developing an increasing range of combat drones, ranging from large, high-flying, bomb-laden models to very small, low-flying devices that can form deadly swarms. Inexpensive, reliable, and implemented by experienced forces, drones have become a key factor in Turkey's military and defense success. Poland is preparing to purchase more than 20 Bayraktar tactical Block 2 unmanned aerial vehicles from Turkey.
İnsansız hava araçlarında dünyanın en iyi 3-4 ülkesinden biriyiz. Bu tecrübe, kabiliyet ve imkanlarımızı NATO müttefikimiz Polonya ile de paylaşmaktan büyük bir memnuniyet duyuyoruz. Türkiye tarihinde ilk kez NATO ve Avrupa Birliği üyesi bir ülke ile insansız hava aracı ihraç edecektir.
The combat drones will be armed with anti-tank projectiles. Poland will also buy a logistics and training package. The first shipments are scheduled to arrive in 2022. Turkey's indigenous drones have gained worldwide attention in the course of the country's anti-terror operations in Iraq and Syria. The tactical effectiveness, strength and survivability of Turkey's drones in Iraq, Syria, Libya and Caucasia enabled these products to be labeled as combat-proven. All elements of the Bayraktar Tactical Block 2 are being developed and produced domestically, including its electronics, softwares, aerodynamics, design and sub-main systems. Performing active reconnaissance, surveillance and intelligence flights, the Bayraktar Tactical Block 2 has the ability to transmit images to operation centers without delay and engage targets. It boasts a service ceiling of 27,000 feet and a flight endurance of more than 24 hours. It can carry 140 kilograms of payload and can be operated day and night. The Bayraktar Tactical Block 2 stands out as the world's most advanced unmanned aerial vehicle system in its class with its flight automation and performance.
And I'm joined live from Ankara by Merve Seren, who's a security and defense analyst from Ankara Yildirim Beyazıt University. Merve, thank you for joining us here today on The Edge. It seems that every week Turkey makes a new step forward and has another first. Now, this week's first, yesterday, a deal was struck between Turkey and Poland for the first drones to be sold to a NATO member. How important is this in the development of Turkey's defense industry?
Well, actually, as you said, first of all, our Turkish drones they are providing, national security. But at the same time, Turkish drones I think they have successfully altered the battleground, but equations, and also they neutralize the enemy targets in high-intensity conflict areas. As you said, it's in Syria, in Libya, in northern Iraq, in Nagorno-Karabakh, and also, that now first I think they altered the battleground, and now they're altering the global defense market. So I think that one of the main reasons that when we are looking at the demand for these Turkish UAVs, because these drones are, they're often the use of in the real war environment. So they are very much combat-proven systems, and so of course they are very helpful for the, they're also providing air superiority when you're comparing with the other, whether like the helicopter system or the other, defense systems in the air. So they're just like with the air, with the drones, with the UAVs, you're just like providing air superiority for 24 hours for your soldiers on the ground. And then another thing that we can compare about how this, Turkey changed after the global defense market for the UAVs, because when you are comparing the other leading actors in the market, like the United States, like China and Israel, for instance, when you are looking, you can compare with the price, because Turkey's, Turkish drones are much more cheaper when you are comparing with the, the Israel drones or with the American drones. And then another important thing is about the, the procurement process. When you are buying something from the United States, you have to buy them with the foreign military stance, and there are so many criteria that you have to meet for them. And on the other side, as I said, I think the Turkish drone systems are, they were very successful in Phrase Shield, in Olive Branch, in Spring Shield. And so as you see that Turkish army was, liberated even the Syrian border from the terrorist entities with a number of its forces on the ground. And also, as you know, that the Turkish drones also have changed the course of the Libyan civil war by helping this UN recognized, GNA, and they defeated the warlord, Khalifa Haftar on various battlefields across the countries, in crucial western and actually central territories. And as I told you, and when you are looking at the Turkey's defense success, you see that for so many years Turkey was one of the most top defense importer countries. But now Turkey is one of the is ranked in the top 15 arms exporting countries. So I think it's very important, because as we see from the last year, Turkey is ranked as the 13th defense exporter. I think so this is very important. And by the way, Turkey has not just only changed the defense market with its UAVs, but Turkey has also changed it with its artillery system, with its tanks, also with its warships. And one more thing that I think we have to mention about that, Turkey is producing a different kind of drones. So Turkey is now going to sell TB2s because, we sold them into the Ukraine, to the we gave them for the Azerbaijan and in the northern Iraq and in so many countries. But at the same time, I think it's very crucial to underline that Turkey is now producing its TB3s, the TB3 Bayraktar systems, and they are, that unmanned combat aerial vehicles. So on the one side, you are seeing that like 2-3 weeks ago, Canada is, applying kind of covert sanctions towards Turkey, and they said that they canceled off selling like Westcams. But at the same time, you see that Turkey is, get out of this F-35, removed from the F-35 project. But it doesn't matter. Turkey is trying to develop and trying to produce its own systems, own defense systems, with its indigenous systems, and they are locally produced and nationally produced systems. And I think one of the game changers that we see in near future will be the TB3s. As I say, that they are the combat vehicles. So I think, that they are going to be deployed on Turkey's future landing helicopter dock, as we say that Anadolu, instead of the F-35B's aircraft, which has like vertical takeoff and landing capability. So I think it is very important that Turkey in the drone market is, that you can see the success of the TB2s, and we will witness the TB3s. But at the same time, we have got, other firms that are producing.
What I want to ask you. What I want to ask you, Mehmet, there are many different models of drones. For most of us, we only understand the drones that we see in the local high street shops, the ones that have cameras on, so that we can fly around just for fun, looking at the world around us and filming around us. But the drone, in this military hardware sense, has many different capabilities. Also some of them are very huge, aren't they? Could you explain to us what kind of different facilities these drones can do? What are their different systems?
I think, first of all, we have to keep in mind that when Turkey first entered this drone market, Turkey was using these drone systems in order to, conduct reconnaissance and surveillance capabilities. But afterwards, Turkey started to increase and start to develop its advance in the precision strike capabilities. So Turkey gained a new ability to chase and conduct operations in remote areas without utilizing like conventional combat aircrafts. And and another thing that when we are looking at these UAVs, as I told you, so they are providing intelligence, surveillance, target acquisition, and the reconnaissance. But at the same time, they have got precise strike capabilities. And one more thing that we have to, I think, underline is that I think February 2020 was the turning point for Turkey's use of drone system. Because why? It was the first time that Turkey has started to employ. We are not calling as that like the swarm drone, but we call them as the horde drone attack capability. So now Turkey is the second country after the United States that we are capable of coordinating drone approach. So it is very important, because it was the first time in 2020 that Turkey, used this coordinated drone attacks, horde attack approach.
So what does this actually mean on the battle? What does this actually mean on the battlefield? What are their capabilities when they're in a swarm like that?
Okay, so when we use this horde drone attack, approach, it means that we killed almost 2,700 to almost 3,500 regime militias, which were supported by Iran, were eliminated. So this is very important.
Are they firing bullets or dropping bombs, or what are they doing? What are they able to do?
Yes, they're just bombing the system. So they're just striking, and they're just targeting, and they're just neutralizing the threat. So it is very important, and it's very important to apply the 3F doctrine, as we call it: find, fix, finish. So you are finding the terrorist threat, you are fixing it, and you are then finishing it. So you are just intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and then with the finish, you are just targeting, and you are using your strike capabilities, and you are just eliminating. So I think it is very important. So the new technology technology is being developed so quickly and integrated to the platforms. So as we say that, and another thing I think we have to underline it about this drone capability, the electronic warfare support measures are also strengthened in the TB2s. So when you're just you are developing, drones, they're not just like simple platforms, but you are also developing your munition system, but you are also using your electromagnetic, capabilities, but also you are developing your electronic warfare support measures. So they are very important. So when you are seeing that they've got also like land observation devices that share the snapshots of the imagery intelligence to your infantry. So as I told you, when you're comparing with the other systems, like a helicopter can fly only for 2 hours, but with the drone system, you are supporting your boots on the ground for 24 hours, and you are not just killing or targeting or neutralizing the threat, but you are also sharing intelligence, and you are just providing current intelligence all the time for 24 hours to your infantry with the imaginary intelligence. So it is very important. So when we are looking, Turkey is not just only gained its self-defense capabilities, they were not just only strengths, but also Turkey altered the battleground, and Turkey also changed the defense market. So also they provide a very better topographic vision of the terrain. So it helps the boots on the ground. So in the commandos in your rural areas, they are also, notified from the drones. So as I told you, I think the drones, the Turkish drones, definitely provides a much more, I think they are providing a force protection, and also they are showing your power projection for the future, for Turkey's future defense, trends. So when we are in general, we can summarize that Turkish drones definitely they brought combat efficiency and operational superiority to the boots on the ground.
Well, that's absolutely remarkable. Well, if the drones are working on a find, fix, finish principle, it's surely the Turkish defence industry is working on a find, fix, and continue developing. Mehmet Eren, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. It's been fascinating learning about Turkish drones. Thank you. So Turkey's drone program has contributed to improving its fighting capabilities while concurrently enabling Turkey to benefit from shaping the market as a competitive manufacturer. All these features have earned Turkey a highly prestigious reputation in the worldwide drone market, putting it ahead of many of its competitors. We'll keep reporting on these developments regarding Turkey's defence success. For now, let's move on to our next topic. The 1.8-kilometre-long Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is being built up by an Italian company. Our following infographic has more technical facts about the dam. Egypt has said that Cairo can compensate for the second filling of Ethiopia's controversial dam on the Blue Nile, as Ethiopia plans to fill the dam reservoir with 13.5 billion cubic metres of water during the second filling phase scheduled for July.
Ethiopia plans to begin generating power from its controversial Blue Nile River Dam during the upcoming rainy season between June and August. The $4.6 billion Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is expected to collect 13.5 billion cubic meters of Blue Nile River water in the rainy season, swelling its reservoir to 18.4 billion cubic meters. The Blue Nile, which originates in Ethiopia, is one of two major tributaries of the Nile River, and during the rainy season it contributes up to 80% of the Nile's water. A power line 650 kilometers long has been completed to connect the electricity generated at the dam to the country's power grid. The dam is now 80% complete and is expected to reach full generating capacity in 2023, making it Africa's largest hydroelectric power plant and the world's 7th largest in total. Ethiopia began filling the dam's reservoir last July when heavy rains flooded the Blue Nile. Despite negotiations that have lasted years, Sudan, Egypt and Ethiopia have failed to reach agreement over how to share the Nile River's water, a lifeline for all three countries. The talks with a variety of mediators, including the US government under the previous Trump administration, have failed to produce a resolution.
And to discuss this, I'm joined live from Hawassa in Ethiopia by Bereket Muges, who's an Ethiopian politician and PhD fellow from Hawassa University, and also on the telephone from Istanbul by Mohammed Okta, who's an economic consultant. Bereket, let me start with you. Welcome, first of all, to The Edge again. The dam is progressing. We were expecting the next filling stage to begin in July this year. What is the latest situation? Has the next phase of filling begun, as I've seen somewhere? What's happening right now?
Thank you very much for calling me. I think since last time we met, there has been some progresses in building an Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, because the saving of the water in the dam is not the willingness or unwillingness of the government or anybody. It's just a natural flow. Whenever then the water flow is increasing because of the seasonal rain in Ethiopia, any water that comes, which is above the outflow through the two newly released canals, is saved in the, because the reservoir has a normal flow, which usually gives out is a normal flow to Egypt and Sudan. Anything that comes above that level from Ethiopian rain, which is a normal rainy season, and then usually it gets very rainy at this time, and May, June, July, August is a rainy season in Ethiopia, and it gets highly rainy by this time, and then now I hope the dam itself, by natural flow, is started to be filled, and the progress is improving. As you heard, maybe you have that information, and the project is now 80%. The total project completion is 80%, and technically, Ethiopian government is willing to share all the technicalities of the filling of the second filling of Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And I think there is a positive thing that comes from Egypt also, is the Egyptian foreign minister, as we have been saying for a very long time, this Ethiopian Renaissance Dam filling of the second term is not going to harm any of Egyptian water level or anything that they want to use from Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which we have been saying, which they have admitted at the end of the day, which the technical teams that are agreed in among Ethiopian, Sudan, Egypt, and other countries have also agreed on this. I think it's going very well. I hope 13.5 billion cubic meter water will be reserved within the next 3 months.
So you're confident that, as well as benefiting Ethiopia with providing the water for the hydroelectric power, that at the same time that it shouldn't impact negatively on the country's upstream?
Yeah, you see, technically, I think you understand this, what I'm saying. The normal water flow will not be blocked anyway, which is 48 billion cubic water per year. This amount of water is not going to be blocked because the normal flow, the two outlets that is now functioning, they just gives out that amount per year.
Right.
Anything that comes above that level because of the rainy season will be reserved in the dam. So it does not harm anybody. What it gives to the downstream countries is it will help them to be protected from the rainy season's flood. That unusual flood that happened last year, you remember, we reserved 4.5 billion cubic meter water, but Sudan has been flooded, and then Egypt had been flooded. Now what will this dam, 13.5 billion cubic meter water reservation will help downstream countries is they will feel relaxed when until this summertime passes in Ethiopia. We hope there will not be any flood in Sudan, any flood in Egypt, and then it will help them.
Well,
the other thing is most important. Yes.
Let's just cut that, and we're also joined on the line by Mohammed Okhtar. Mohammed, great confidence that rather than causing problems for countries like Egypt and Sudan, this will in fact provide the normal amount of water and flood protection for these for those countries. What's your latest information on the agreements that have been reached with Ethiopia?
Well, first, some of the information that your guest had says are inaccurate. First, Egypt doesn't face any floods, haven't faced any floods in the 50s. The Aswan High Dam protects Egypt from the floods, and the Nasser Lake protects Egypt from the floods. So Egypt had never had a problem with flooding for the last 60 years. Maybe Sudan will suffer from flooding, but Egypt haven't suffered from that. And the other thing, he indicated that 13 billion cubic meters is going to be withheld from downstream countries and behind the dam, and that will affect these countries significantly. Just yesterday, the Egyptian Minister of Irrigation has spoken about that Ethiopia will open only 2 floodgates, while Egypt will need Ethiopia to open 4 floodgates, and Egypt had offered to pay for these new floodgates to be opened, and Egypt had presented Ethiopia with 15 different solutions to mitigate the negative impact on the downstream countries while achieving the interests of Ethiopia in electricity generation, and had carried out different simulations. But Ethiopia always had refused to even discuss this, and the outcome is going to be bad for all downstream countries. Ethiopia haven't tried to come back to the negotiation table, and they keep speaking about that as an Ethiopian sovereignty issues, and they don't really care what the downstream countries are saying about it. There are some pushback from the United States and other countries and the African Union to try to bring them to the table, but clearly Ethiopia is going along in this endeavor to fill the dam without really caring about the interests of downstream countries when it comes to the water resources. 13 billion cubic meter is at least 20% of Egypt's annual water need, and that's going to impact Egypt and Sudan quite negatively for years to come, not just for this year.
Well, that sounds very serious. Now, Barakat, obviously, Ethiopia is going to put a positive spin on this because it's such a project for the country to be proud of. But what about the suggestion that negotiations aren't quite as rosy as you said earlier, that there are still some disputes that need to be ironed out? Is Ethiopia willing to discuss these with the other countries?
Yes, Ethiopia has been discussing with Egypt and Sudan for the last 8 years, I guess, since 2005. Now it is almost 8 years. I think there hasn't been any refusal to discuss with Egypt and Sudan. And now the problem is Egypt is following something that is against Ethiopian sovereignty. Like now Egypt and Sudan are now preparing themselves for the Nile something army around the Horn of Africa, which is really very, very frightening, that Ethiopia is not willing to fight with anybody, any foreign country by this time because of this water. I mean, water is a common thing that everybody has to use equally and then fairly. And that seems that Egypt and Sudan are pushing us not diplomatically, but forcefully to accept their plans and negotiation. I mean, Ethiopia is not going to take that type of negotiation on the table. We are going to negotiate because we feel that we are brothers and sisters. It's not because Egypt is a superpower or US is working with Egypt or somebody else is working with Egypt or whatever. And then what my brother Muhammad said is, he said Ethiopia does not care about downstream countries. This is really a nonsense. I mean, what is the reason that we don't care about the downstream countries? There is no way. If two outlets are enough to send enough water to Egypt, and what is the necessity of opening the other gates? If it is necessary, Ethiopia is still willing to open other gates to just let the water go through its own natural flow to Egypt and Sudan. And the other thing that maybe Africa and then African Union are committed to support Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt to negotiate on their own resources, where Egypt is not really willing to accept African solutions for African. They are running elsewhere and then trying to use other pressures from international community because they have upper hand there, I guess, everywhere in international communities. Now we are facing some types of pressures from there. It is Egypt that is pushing Sudan to occupy Ethiopia. Ethiopia has been negotiating with Sudan on the border. And then when it comes to this time, now Egypt pushes Sudan to occupy back to this Ethiopian territory and then trying to influence Ethiopia in a way that harms its sovereignty. This time, I think Ethiopia needs to work on how to protect itself, which you cannot take water with force, but only with peace and love.
Well, let's hope the peace and love and the brotherly relationships see through for a win-win for everyone. Bereket Mojiz, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Edge. Thank you. Mohammed, let me just throw that back to you. The suggestion that Ethiopia is doing everything that it can to find peaceful solutions, using the African Union, but the suggestion that perhaps Egypt is using other international actors to put pressure. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a matter of life and death to Egypt. Egypt has no other source of water but the Nile, and for Egypt it's a matter of existence. And I'm sure Egypt is going to use all cards on the table to try to bring Ethiopia to a favorable position to both Egypt and Sudan. And Ethiopia had refused to engage in serious negotiation over the last 2 years and have been giving Egypt and Sudan the runaround. And Egypt now is flexing its diplomatic muscle and military muscle to send clear signals to Ethiopia that Egypt is going to use all resources that it can use to move this problem from a stalemate that is happening right now in favor of Ethiopia blocking the water Nile to Egypt and Sudan. And Egypt is not going to just stop and watch being starved of water for the next millennia, basically, because of this dam. And as I said, they are sending clear signal to Ethiopia with the current military maneuvers between Egypt and Sudan under the name of Nile protectors. That sends a very clear message to Ethiopia right now that they need to come back to the negotiating table. Ethiopia has a lot of internal problems in Tigray region and also in Beni Shangul region, which is the dam located at. And the U.S. just imposed sanctions on Ethiopia. So Ethiopia militarily and politically in a very tight spot now, and I think the rational thing for them to do is to re-engage with Egypt seriously and get an agreement going that will be favorable for both countries and not favorable just for one side, which is Ethiopia right now.
Well, indeed. At the end of the day, it's always best where diplomatic channels can keep the taps open, so to speak, that this is much better than entering into any form of conflict. But let's hope that this situation can be resolved. Mohammed Okhtar, thank you so much for joining us today on The Edge. Now, the outstanding dispute currently putting Addis Ababa and Cairo at loggerheads concerns the distribution of its vital waters. The best-case scenario is if all parties can get back to the negotiating table and come to a quick agreement. The current tensions are spilling over into tough talk from the diplomats. We'll see how the situation develops. But for now, let's move on to our final topic, which is also an international dispute, namely the Iran nuclear deal. Iran and global powers have held several rounds of negotiations since April in Vienna, working on steps that Tehran and Washington must take on sanctions and nuclear activities to return to full compliance with the nuclear pact.
Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog are extending a recently expired monitoring agreement by a month, avoiding a collapse that could have pitched wider talks on reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear deal into crisis. The move gives breathing space to indirect negotiations between the US and Iran that resume in Vienna this week. European diplomats had warned that failure to extend the monitoring pact would endanger those talks, which aim to bring the two countries back into full compliance with the 2015 pact. The reprieve will only be brief, however, since the extension will expire soon after Iran's June 18 presidential election, which is likely to bring in new interlocutors for the International Atomic Energy Agency and the major powers. The 2015 accord is designed to ensure Iran does not develop nuclear weapons by restricting its uranium enrichment program, while Tehran says that it has never wanted to build atomic bombs. Former US President Donald Trump's administration abandoned the nuclear accord 3 years ago and then reimposed harsh economic and trade sanctions on the Islamic Republic, while Iran responded by breaching the 2015 deal's restrictions on its nuclear activities.
And now joined live from Batumi in Georgia by Arash Aziz, who's an Iranian writer and historian at New York University. Arash, thank you for joining us again here today on The Edge. The talks over the JCPOA, the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, have been ongoing in Vienna for a few weeks now. What is the latest roundup from those talks?
There were some talks today, is the fifth round, and there have been some upbeat sounds coming for a while. President Rouhani of Iran said last week that the U.S. had agreed to lift significant sanctions. Of course, this was basically denied on the other side. It's not confirmed. Mikhail Ulyanov, the Russian envoy to the talks has sounded upbeat throughout. Ali Rabi, the spokesperson of government in Iran, essentially a spokesperson for President Rouhani's administration, has sounded very upbeat, and he said there are only minor issues minor issues have remained, which is similar to the language President Rouhani used, whereas Abbas Araghchi, Iran's top diplomat at the talks, used a slightly more guarded language. Look, I've covered these nuclear negotiations many years before. There's always a bit of a psychological war of how two sides might come and speak about how, we are very near the deal is within reach. And they hope that this actually will affect the negotiations. There's clearly a desire on both sides to reach to a deal that is on the side of the United States and on the side of the current Iranian administration, which will be in office till August, no matter what happens in the elections next month. There is definitely a sort of desire on both sides. On the Iranian side, of course, the negotiation team are not the actual decision makers, which is the Supreme Leader's office. And on the American side, even though they are the decision makers, they also have to contend with significant pressure from Israel, from the countries of the region, and also from the opposition in the United States. So this will definitely affect the calculations on both sides. But it's very, we have to see what happens in the fifth round of talks. But more than one person of the talks has been unusually optimistic and promising that a return of U.S. to the JCPOA is indeed a possibility.
Well, that's certainly very hopeful. But obviously, as you said, there are many different pressures on these talks. As you said, the elections are due to be held next month in Iran. How much is that putting pressure on to coming to an agreement in the coming days or weeks?
Well, the Guardian Council, which is a body in Iran who decided who gets to run, declared the list of candidates, and this is not a real elections, basically. These are the most restrictive elections since at least mid-1990s. The last time Iran had an election this restricted, I was a little kid. So effectively, they're handing the elections to Ibrahim Raisi, a hardliner conservative who's the head of the judiciary and close to the Supreme Leader and close to the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the IRGC, which is the real power in the country now. So, he's not directly close to them necessarily. He's not one of them. There were candidates who were closer, but he's certainly of the same line. So these are not really real elections. They're handing the power over to Ayatollah Raisi, who himself actually said today that he didn't want it to be such a shoe-in and that he's negotiating to add more candidates, which sort of makes the whole thing a bit farcical. But the reality is the same power that decides who run, or in this case, who not to run, they disqualified former presidents and sort of many other political figures from running, are the same powers who will decide what happens to the deal. The negotiators are basically doing the legwork of talking to the West and talking to these diplomats, but the decision will be taken by the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, whose real base of power is now the men with money and arms in the IRGC.
Now, earlier this year, there was an additional protocol with Iran about the images from a series of surveillance cameras showing it so that some monitoring could be done of what's happening at the Iran nuclear sites. That was due to have been cut off, but yesterday an extension was given to that protocol. Iran allowed those images to be saved for another month. So is this a sign that Iran is trying to give something into the pot? And is America willing to give anything back?
Well, no, it's not really a concession to just have to extend this for a month. What it does show is that Iran wants to continue the negotiations. So, in the negotiations, it has long been clear the United States needs to lift the sanctions that it had already lifted as part of the JCPOA, there's a disagreement on which sanction. There were 700 sanctions added during President Trump's reign. Some of them can't be removed because, they're sort of not directly related to the nuclear file. So on the U.S. side, there should be lifting of a significant number of sanctions. On the Iranian side, a return to the nuclear commitments under the deal. That means significantly downscaling enrichment, and yes, allowing IAEA inspections as part of the additional protocol. So it's clear what two sides need to give. It's a question of how they can get there. And as I said, there are some positive signs that they'll be able to get to get there. But the extension given to IAEA by a month, it's not really a concession on part of Iran, and you could see Rafael Grossi was happy that this extension was given, but also not a static, and being very clear that it's a stopgap measure as far as the agency is concerned, and it doesn't replace the actual live monitoring that they can do. The other issue, of course, is that there are many undeclared nuclear sites in Iran that need to, that further inspections will need to be done as part of a serious inspections regime, because there have been signs that Iran hasn't been forthright or honest about some of these nuclear sites, as a new book explains actually in detail, based on the nuclear files of Iran, which were stolen by Israel a few years ago, Iran nuclear archives. And now there's not a smoking gun to say, yes, Iran was actually secretly building a nuclear weapon. The basic idea is that it stopped weapons part of its program around 2003. The new book based on these archives doesn't refute that, but it does show that Iran's nuclear activity is broader than it had been previously imagined. And even after JCPOA has reached expansion of IAEA inspections to some of these sites that are often revealed by spies of Israel or other sources, will certainly be on the table, because it's part of making sure Iran doesn't have a path to a nuclear weapon.
Well, whether or not a deal is agreed, it seems the issue will remain complicated forevermore. Arash Azizi, thank you so much for joining us today here on The Edge and bringing us right up to date. Thank you. Iran's nuclear program is marked by international negotiations and sanctions as Iran continues to develop an extensive nuclear fuel cycle. We'll see whether the parties can reach a common point. Now, before closing our program, let's have a look at social media to hear your voices and reactions on today's top stories shared with the hashtags JCPOA. So, the JCPOA has been on many people's minds. Let's see what they've been writing on Twitter. Mikhail Ilyanov says the Joint Commission opened today the fifth and probably final round of the Vienna talks on restoration of the JCPOA. Participants expressed readiness to do their best to resolve remaining outstanding issues and to complete negotiations successfully as soon as possible. And Ali Vaiz says Iran's flagship conservative paper leads tomorrow's issue, taking Rouhani's economic record to task, while also criticising the IAEA agreement as a one-sided concession. If JCPOA talks succeed, expect them to simultaneously criticise its terms and take credit for its benefits. And Laura Kennedy says rescuing the JCPOA is one of the toughest diplomatic assignments out there. So kudos to US envoy to Iran and other partners on making progress. Other good news as Rafael Grossi reaches agreement with Iran on continuing IAEA measures. Let's now take a look at our video of the day, which tells the story of a Gaza resident who says there is no safe place in Gaza.
My name is Nada Al-Ashi. I'm in my last semester of university. I'm supposed to graduate a month from now. I moved to Gaza in 2015. I've always heard about the war, but I never experienced it. Hearing about the war isn't like living the war. I never thought that so much damage would be caused by one bomb. So many lives and dreams are being buried down to the ground with this rubble around us. My friends outside of Gaza keep telling me, Nada, stay safe, stay safe. But nobody comprehends that there's no safe place in Gaza. No one actually knows when it's their last day. Palestinians have the right to live a dignified life.
And that's all for this episode of The Edge with me, Andy Boynes. Stay tuned as we'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth analysis on top stories and a look beyond the edge.